And we're back. And it's COMP305, and it's winter 2016, lesson 4, part 1. So last we left off, again, we were working on our little mail pilot demo. And again, remember that your mail pilot equivalent, you're going to make your own 2D side scroller or whatever. That's due on Friday, right? Friday at midnight. And there's some requirements. Make sure you meet the requirements. Go step by step so you don't miss anything. Remember, I'm going to be marking you when I do. I'm going to look at each line. So, if you want to know how good you're doing, when you hand something in, or if you are questioning it, just read the document, and you can kind of figure it out, right? Did I hand this piece in? And let me just show you that again for a second. And people are smiling at me when I'm saying this, but it's true. This is what I do, right? You could literally mark yourself in some sense. Let's take a look at this just quickly again. So here's my shooter, right? So if you look at it, like example, a gameplay screen where the main game occurs and the background will scroll in one direction only. And I prefer side scrolling because top scrolling is like mine, right? That's 2 marks for UI, so that's your user interface, and 2 marks for functionality to make it go, right? The user interface piece is, what does it look like? Is it jerky movement? That's where you get your marks from. So when I start moving, is it smooth? Does it look nice? Did you somehow draw it in paint? Does it look that bad, right? How good does it look, and how does it make sense? Does it go with the theme of your game? Don't give me some kind of road and then you have a plane that's on the road, right? That doesn't make sense. Or you're in space, but you pick up I don't know, stars in space and stuff. It's got to make sense. It's got to be maybe stars in space is a bad example, but something else like gas cans in space. Okay, so you go into space. You're kind of spaceship, and there's a gas can, right? That's not right. That doesn't look right. So you'll lose a few marks there in terms of continuity, those kind of things. Same thing with your avatar. So if I was going to look at your avatar, does it match up with what the game's theme is? What's the goal of the level? When you make this level that you're making, what's the goal? Is it just to live, survive? In Mail Pilot, the game I'm making with you guys, is to survive. It's how long you can go without dying, right? That's really what the thing is about, right? It's a survivor type game, or survival. But you might have a goal. You might have a goal where you have to reach a certain point and defeat the enemy or something. That could be something you want to do too. And when it comes to simple AI, for me, simple AI at this level is random enemies. That's what I mean by simple AI. Some of it might include for you, this is why there's 3 marks for the enemies, for the UI, how it looks, how it functions, and how it moves, and 3 marks for functionality, because I don't want your enemies to cross over each other unless they make sense, right? So you have to figure that out. That's part where, if you want to get the A, you have, this is where you might lose a mark here because you can't. Your enemies cross over because you can't figure it out, right? That's okay. You might lose a mark here. Do you know what I'm saying? But that's how I would mark. Go through it and go, okay, so how does the scoring system work? Do you have a scoring system? If there's no scoring system, you lose 2 marks, right? So when you look at your stuff, whatever you're handing in, if you're missing something that I've asked for, that's where you're going to lose your marks. It's very simple. I'm not going to make it up. Do you know what I'm saying? In terms of how I'm going to score you. And by the way, for people who have taken courses with me before, you know this. But for people who haven't, then here's the way we do it. Okay, so that's just a reminder of how we're going to do that for when I do marking for you. I'll try and talk to you, each one of you, about your actual project. All right, there might be a time where we all sit down and I start going by, and I'll have some time during the latter part of the semester where I can sit down with you one-on-one and say, see this, Mark? And this is, here's some feedback directly on this, what you did. What do you think about this? And if I have time after I mark assignment number 1, I'll try and do that again. One-on-one, I'll try and sit down with you and give you some feedback, because to explain why, and I can write some of the feedback on eCentennial, but it won't be enough to explain everything. I'll try, but there's 40 of you, right? And there's 1 of me, right? So I'm going to try and give you as much feedback as I can. It takes time to do that. Okay, but let's go back to what we're doing. So remember all the piece parts that we're trying to accomplish today, right? I want to try and show you all the parts to get you guys 100%, right, for your project, right? That's the idea here. It's not about me trying to be hard on you. This is not about, not here, not in the other courses. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make it easier for you by showing you examples of how to do your work. Okay, so here's COMP305. We're working on this winter 2016 demo. And let's play it and see where we are, just to kind of review where we left off from last time. We've got a lot of this stuff ready to go. We've created some colliders with our polygon collider. That's what we've done last time, but we really haven't set up collisions yet, right? So there's two parts of setting up a collision system. One, and I can move around my plane now, right? So it looks good, it looks okay, but there's no collisions right now. It doesn't do anything, there's no sound. These are things we can try and add in over the next couple of sessions together, right? So I want to try and complete the game, right? We have a collider, but we have no collisions. And if you wanted to look up some kind of collision system or whatever, and especially for 2D collisions, so if I say 2D collision, if you're going to look it up, right, on Unity, right, let's look that up. And you see that there's the on collision enter 2D. That's one of them. And this is good and bad. And we'll talk about this again. It says it's sent when an incoming collider makes contact with this object's collider. 2D physics only, right? There it is. Further information about the collision is reported in the collision 2D parameter passed during the call. If you don't need this information, you can declare on collision enter 2D without the parameter, so without this, right? Okay, now usually we include it anyway. Collision events will be sent to a disabled mono behaviors to allow enabling behaviors in response to collisions. So you can disable them, and then when you collide, it'll enable them. Neat. Okay, cool. So this is neat on collision enter 2D. But what I want to do is I want to create everything as triggers. And the reason for that is because we don't want physics collisions here with our plane and our clouds. I don't want when the plane hits the cloud that it's going to shift somehow or be affected by the cloud, like it's being hit by the cloud. That's not the game I want to make. I want it when you pass over the cloud or intersect one collider with another, it registers a collision. That's what I want. That's a different kind of collision. That is, instead of on collision enter, this is the script that we're going to use. We're going to use on trigger enter, which is what I want to look at, right? So on trigger enter. And it's on trigger enter 2D. Now remember that we have to kind of make sure that for all this to work, we have to find the right script to make it work. So let's try this out. And there's some other requirements which we're going to see as well. So if I say on trigger enter 2D, look, I'm just typing it in, and you have to know these things, and that's why I'm showing them to you. So if I say on trigger enter 2D for Unity, and I go to the scripting API, it gives us another example here, right? Here's the example. So sent when another object enters a trigger collider attached to this object, 2D physics only. Again, if I was going to make it so that it's on trigger enter without the 2D, that would mean 3D physics. If you're doing 3D objects, this is 2D, we're doing 2D, so we need to use this one. Notice that we also have to use the collider 2D as a parameter if you're going to use the information that's incoming from this, which we would. We're going to use the information coming in from this because we want to know what hit us, right? Was it the cloud or was it the island? Which one did I collide with, right? So I need this information. I need the parameter to come in, right? So here's an example of this. Notice that I'm going to make a class, and I'm going to use this method on trigger enter 2D with the collider 2D, and they're using an example of, so this is the type, and the actual variable name or object name is called other. That's kind of not really descriptive, and I probably won't use that. Right? Now it says character in quicksand is equal to true if I'm colliding with something else. That's what it means. Anything else. Right? This isn't really descriptive enough for us. We want to make sure that if, in this example, I'm colliding with a cloud, I can tell if I'm colliding with a cloud or if I'm colliding with an island. Those are the two things I want to make sure. So I've got to be able to compare the name of the collider, which we set up before as tags, the tag name. Okay, so let's look back at that. So we've kind of set that up ahead of time. So our islands have a tag of island. This is important. Our plane is a player, right? And down inside here, our cloud prefab, right, is have a tag of cloud. These are custom tags that I use to create, and I use the add tag object here to do that. Okay, that's how we did it. Cool. Notice that the order and layer has to be correct. So they're all the layers of the clouds are all 3, and that's okay because if they cross over each other, who cares? They're just clouds. In your game, you're going to have to watch this because that might mean that one will appear over on top of another one. That makes no sense for that kind of enemy or that kind of obstacle that you want to mess around with. Okay, cool. So I've got that. So I've got the requirements. If I look at the island, let's try with the island first. The island has a collider. Notice that it is a trigger collider, right? And same thing with the plane. The plane has a collider, and it's a trigger type collider. Okay, cool. So I want to use my game controller, right, to say this. If my plane, right, my plane collides somehow, right, I want to detect the collision, right? Where would that collision be detected? Should I write another script, is what I'm saying, that I attach to the plane, or should I write that script that's attached to the game controller? And I want you to think about this for a second, ladies and gents, because there's some tricks here. So when I attach a script, and again, this could be a kind of a quiz question if I wanted to ask it, right? If I attach a script to an object, right, what does the this keyword refer to? The object, right? The current object. So how do I access a collider? How do I access, first of all, you know, if I'm checking to see if my plane, and on trigger enter, if I write on collision on trigger enter 2D in a script, what is that script? I mean, it's referring to that particular thing. I can't collide with my game object. So if I write on trigger enter in a script that I attach to game controller, nothing's going to collide with my game controller, right? Because there isn't any game controller presence. It's just an empty object that I have to control my game, right? So if I have a script, I'm just thinking this out with you, just to see how I position it. Because remember, each script has to be attached to some kind of object, right? So if I attach to my game controller, the on trigger enter applies to my game controller, right? Okay. So I have to trigger collisions then, if that's true, with the objects themselves. My player would have some kind of player collider script built in, right? And then it should report that, right? It should report a collision, for example, that I can read, right? That I can detect somehow, right? And if it reports a collision, right, all it's going to do is update something on my game controller. That's the way it should work. So the collider should stay with the player, right, to make it easier. Certainly, you can build this stuff to make it work different ways, and there's other ways of doing it, but we're talking about the complexity rises if we try and do something like that. So let's go back to the plane, right, and I want to make another separate script. I could do it on the controller, okay? So like right now we have a script on the plane called my plane controller. But sometimes what I want to do is I want to separate my concerns, right? My collider script or my plane collider or player collider, whatever you want to call it, so I can focus in on that script alone, all right? And also it becomes more portable if I ever want to move that to some other object, okay? Which we'll talk about in the future. So let's do that. So I'm going to kind of go here, add a new component, right? We'll do it this way. And I'm going to go down to new script, right? And I'm going to call this script my, and again, this we talked about plane controller. I'm going to call it plane collider. So plane collider, right? That's what it is. My plane collider script. And it's in C#. I'm going to click create and add. Okay, where does that script go by default? Quiz question. So if I create a new script through the add component, where? The root folder, which is bad, right? So I don't want it here. This is where the plane controller. I want to take this plane control collider and I want to put it inside the scripts folder to keep organized. That's the very simple way of doing it. Okay, so the scripts folder is in here. And if I check my scripts folder now, you can see that the plane collider is in there, right? All right. Again, this is a very simple example. So let's try this out. So I'm going to double click in here. Now, because we're separating our concerns, so we have our control on one hand and we have our collision script on another hand. Do I need, in this particular case, some kind of update? Not sure, right? I may not even need a start in this thing. But let's write the thing we do need, right? We need, and we'll start writing this, public void, right? It's not going to return anything. And we're going to write this in. Notice that there's no code hinting for this script. If I go on, control space, it doesn't really know what I'm asking for. So I wanted to on trigger enter 2D, right? That's what I want to write. So on trigger, and each word it's in upper camel case, which means each word is capitalized. On trigger enter 2D, right? And in there, I want to take something called a collider, just like our script says. So we're going to say collider 2D. Make sure it's collider 2D, right? Not collider, collider 2D. And we want to talk about the other game object. The other stands for the other game object. Let's just call it other game object, right? Other game object. I know it's long, but it's descriptive, right? And that'll help you guys understand what's going on. Okay, cool. So I've got this onTriggerEnter2D, which is an event handler. And you might ask, well, where's the event listener, Tom? Where's the event listener? Anyone know? Remember, to make events happen, and it doesn't matter in C#, unless you're using delegates, or if you're using something like Java, or you're using something like JavaScript, or whatever the programming language is, you need two parts. Well, in general, event listener and event handler, right? You can also use the dispatcher too, but let's leave that alone, right, for a second. So event listener, right, is the thing that we listen for, the trigger, something that's going to happen. Well, guess what? What's listening for this trigger here? Yeah, that's when we put it on, right? So that's telling us what to listen for. When I have a collider, once I attach a collider to an object, it's almost like I'm giving it the capability to listen for collision events. All right, that's what I'm giving it to, right? Otherwise, I'm not listening. So that's one piece. And it's happening in the background. I don't have to write any special script for that. It's automatic when I attach it. There are some tricks to this, and I'm going to talk about it with you so we know. Okay, cool. So onTriggerEnter2D, that's what's going to happen. All right, that's number one. Let's test for that. So if my plane, right, collides with anything, right, if there's any kind of trigger, any collision whatsoever, right, and again, what this is checking for is any trigger. I'm going to collide with any other, collider, right? So whatever the collider is that I'm triggering, which is part of the other game object, right? Then I want to know. So let's try this out. So if I say, if other game object dot, and look what it gives me. Other game object gives me a bunch of stuff. Is touching, is trigger, enabled. Oh, what's this? How can other game object, how come I have that, right? I know this is confusing, right? But I need this game object piece, which goes back to this and why they mentioned this as game object and the other in the first place. Because I want you to be able to read what this says, right? If I go up here and I call this other game object, with my .accessor method, it's got to read clearly for you. So if I say other game object, that doesn't make any sense. I want to mention it so that way you know why. Now, normally you'd be tempted to do something like this, other game object, right? Because you want to change it from other. What does other mean, right? But if you link them all together, other.gameObject, then you know that's how it flows. So that's why they have it here the way it is. So let's go back to what it was. So other, go back to here, other, right? All it means is I'm declaring a variable called other, right? And when I go use my .accessor method, I can access the game object, right? Okay, here's the next one. I want a compare tag. I want to compare with a tag that exists already, right? I'm listening for an island collision. So we're going to use a special thing called compare tag, right? And in brackets, the string value of the tag name. Okay? String value of the tag name. So we're listening for island. So if it collides with the island, then what I want to do is inside this little statement that I want to put in, I want to say a debug.log, right? Island collision. That's very simple, right? So there's some simple stuff that we're going to do. I'm saving that thing, the script. Does it make sense? So what I'm saying is, other is the incoming collider, right? So I have a collision. We've intersected, right? With me, with another trigger collider, okay? Some kind of, we've intersected. Okay, cool. Now there's two parts to it. I have my variable, this variable that's incoming, this local parameter that's being sent in, right? Now is a local variable, not a class-based variable that's only available, accessible here in this method, right? That's what this other is. And now I'm using the getAccessor method, or the what you want to call it, equivalent of looking at the other components, and I'm saying, hey, give me the other game object, compare its tag to island. If it's true, right, then do something. And this is what I'm doing. I'm going to say debug.log island collision. Let's try this out. So let's see if it works. And we'll see what the problems could possibly be, all right, if I was going to do this method. So I'm going to go back to Unity, and I'm going to run this thing, right? And as long as I don't have any errors, right? Well, I just ran over an island. How come there was no collision? Look, here's my console, and I'm not seeing nothing, right? Right? And here's something to make sure: does my plane have my trigger collider on it? Right? Here's my plane collider. That's what it's called, the script. Now I'm not moving my plane around, but let's do that. Let's move my plane so it's over the island. Okay, so I just crossed over the island, right? I'm not seeing anything in console. That should work theoretically, right? Just saying. These are the things, the pieces we're looking at. Okay, cool. So I've made it so that, notice how I have my my polygon collider 2D is a trigger, right? Let's take this off for a second and see if that makes a difference. So I'm going to just do that. And this is in real time. So I'm going to go back to the game and then go over this, and then that doesn't make any difference. Okay, let's leave that alone. And let's go back to my island. Make sure that my island is called island, because that's the tag. And then is trigger, and take that off. Let's see if that works. So that doesn't make any sense. And then let's put the one back for the plane for a second. Let's see if that does anything. So put the island back in. So I'm just playing around with these values to show you this thing. Okay, so okay, there we go. No collider. Okay. Here's where it gets funky, right? I'm gonna try it and troubleshoot. I'm not even getting any collision whatsoever. I'm specifically looking for, right? I'm specifically looking for, you know, a tag. Right, that's what I'm looking for when on collision enter. Okay. Let's test to see if I collide with anything at all. You're seeing nothing? Different? Is that what you think what the issue is? Could it be? Have you tried it out? Is that what you think it is? Yeah, it's not it. I like your thinking though, but that's not the thing. I was hoping that you come up with a better solution. I don't know why this is coming up. But don't worry about it if you're not guessing properly. It's okay. So let's take a look at this. So I've got my plane, and I've got my trigger, and I want to go back to my collider script. So I want to go back to here, and instead of doing this, so let's just comment this out. So I'm just going to comment this piece out altogether, right? Because we put it in here. This is what I want to do, but I'm having some trouble in here, right? So let's just do this: debug.log collision. So and we're going to kind of say, here's a collision, any kind of collision. So any collision with anything else, any other object, right? I want to say collision, because then we can see if is it my compare tag method, right? Is that what the problem is? What's the problem? Because it should detect some kind of collision with my trigger. It's a trigger collision that I'm putting together, right? Okay, let's try it. So I'm saving it, going back to Unity, rerunning it, and seeing if there's a difference. So now any kind of collision, okay, no clouds, doesn't collide with the clouds, and if I run over my island, nothing. So I get no collisions. There's not collision being detected whatsoever, right? No collisions. Yes, there's a piece that I'm missing, right? And that's what I want to tell you. It doesn't make any sense, right, when you think about it. But there's a piece that I'm missing for each of my objects, and the piece that I'm missing is the rigid body 2D. If I don't have a rigid body 2D, no collisions available for me. Let's try this out. So let's add it into all my plane, my island, and my cloud. Be careful, because once you add rigid body 2D, it actually creates, you could have a physics-like effect if you don't put on is trigger, right? So there's two parts to collisions. One is the shape of your collider, and the other thing is to define your rigid body for your object, all right? Okay, let's do that. So let's do the second piece. So I'm going to add another component to my plane, which we're going to go to physics 2D, right? And if I go to rigid body 2D, here it is, rigid body 2D, notice that it has a couple of, I'm just going to compress these so you can see this. I'm going to collapse these little things here. I'm leaving the other things the way they are. And by the way, you can move these components around by going here and saying move up, right? So it's moving up to here so I can see my rigid body. And I want to move it one more up, so it's before I want to move it before my collider 2D. So there's my rigid body 2D, there's my collider underneath it. You might think that the order doesn't matter, but I like to do that. I like to put my rigid body first and then my collider, right? Okay, cool. I'll use auto mass. That's not cool. My mass for my plane is 1, and my gravity scale is 1. I want to make my gravity scale 0 because I don't want any gravity on this plane. Otherwise, it'll fall down, right? Which just doesn't make sense. So that's got to go to 0. My mass, if I put it to 0, it's not going to allow me to. It's going to go to like 0.001, so micro mass. No angular drag, let's just put that to 0 too. So I don't want any gravity effects for this. I just want to have some kind of collision. Look at collision detection is important, which is discrete, right? That's good. You can also change it to continuous, right? Discrete is what you want, right? So this continuous means there's got to be continuous collision for it to work, right? And then I can make this work. I can't do a collider. I can't create a shape. The collider is just a shape around my plane or my object, right? No collider, no rigid body 2D, no collision, right? Let's try the same thing for the island. So the island's got to have that. That's how those ends. Good practice for you guys. Physics 2D, and I'm going to go to rigid body 2D. Again, I'm going to reduce that to 0. I'm going to go to 0 and 0. Please do this. If you forget to do this kind of stuff, what's going to happen is you'll have some weird collisions, like actual collisions that could occur, right? Okay, cool. I also want to move this component up a couple times, just in terms of hierarchy. I like to put my components in order, right? My sprite render, my rigid body 2D, and then let's kind of move up again too. Hold on a second, move up. This my polygon collider 2D has got to be before my usually all the other scripts. I want to put my scripts typically at the bottom of my component chain. Okay, it's not necessary, right? It's just they're attached. As long as they're attached, you're good, right? But I like to put them in order. Okay, cool. So there's my rigid body 2D. Now my cloud. My cloud is more difficult because it's a prefab. I'm going to go to my cloud. Think how we haven't put those in yet. And notice that there's a different order of events here. Cloud controller is there, my cloud renderer, and I want to put my collider 2D underneath my other one. So first we'll add our physics 2D, and we'll go to, again, rigid body 2D, and we'll open this up. We'll expand this thing, move this preview down for a second, and we'll change the mass to 0 again, which is going to default to 0.00. Our angular drag to 0, and our gravity scale to 0. For all the options we have here. And again, I'm going to move this up. So I'm going to move it up. It's going to be above my polygon collider, right? So I got my rigid body 2D. And you know what? Again, from a scripts perspective, I like my scripts to be lower. So I'm going to move this down. You don't have to move this down. So my scripts are at the bottom and my colliders and everything else are at the top, right? Why? Because I'm not really going to touch these, but I might touch this. Right? I might change my values down here, so I want them to be available to me or accessible, right? So I don't have to skip this, through this whole thing. I can also do this too. I'm not going to manually transform anything here from my cloud. So I'm going to save everything here, save, go back to my planes, make sure I did everything the same. No, let's move my script down a little bit, so I'll move down. Just so that way it's just organized a little bit different, by the way. That's all it is. Okay, I'm just organizing. It doesn't mean anything. It has no effect on the way we do our stuff, okay? So here's my island controller. Okay, that's good. It's at the bottom. My plane controller is at the bottom, and my cloud controller is at the bottom. All those things are at the bottom. Okay, good. Let's try it now and see if that makes a difference. So plane, and I press play, and then let's see if I collide with anything. Yay, I get collision, right? So I'm starting to collide with stuff. Because now notice on the right here, I'm starting to get collision with anything I collide with. See? On collision enter 2D, on trigger enter. So once my trigger hits, I'm starting to get collisions. Guys and girls. On the exam, I'm going to test this. I'm telling you right now, there's going to be two pieces you need. The rigid body 2D, and you need some kind of collider, whether it's a real collider, like collider 2D, or you're going to have some kind of, the test you're going to use is trigger collider. There's got to be a way to, to detect collision. Okay, cool. All right, so here we go. We got this part. I can get rid of this. I know this is working now. But I only care about when I collide, right, with my island, right? So let's get rid of this and kind of make this kind of piece work here. And then what I'm going to do is after this, I'm going to update GitHub. So you guys have what I have, right? So that way there's no discrepancies here, right? Okay, cool. So I'm going to save this. I'm just doing a debug.log and island collision, right? That's all I'm doing here. And let's save everything, going back over to my Unity, right, and play. Whoa, some errors. Let's see what the errors are. Did I forget an extra thing? I may have. What did I do? Oh, I missed one. I might have erased one by accident. So there we go. That's okay. And the way to do that is to check to see all the braces kind of tell you what they are. I like to also format my selection a lot of time. And indenting doesn't really do it. If I say indent selection, right, on indent, it's just going to indent. That doesn't do anything for me. I want to format stuff, right? So, usually what I do is, you can go through here. Oh, look, here's version control. I can do this too. Yeah, Sure, but it's not going to be accurate. Right? On Visual Studio 2013, 2015, you can format your stuff a little easier. On MonoDevelop, it's very basic. You have to kind of go through it yourself. So that means what I want to do is kind of indent here just one, and then indent this whole thing another time. Right? That's kind of what I want to do. Or if I'm not going to do it that way, maybe a couple of steps in there, right? Just to show me that this is part of this, right? Here it is. And then this piece, this is here, like that. Probably the best way to do it, right? Okay, good. So I've got my indentation. It looks nice as an example, and I want to test this out now. So I've saved it. I've updated my script so it only detects island collisions. This is important. So I can detect the difference between island and cloud, right? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go back to Unity, and I'm going to notice that my game is still, the collision is there. My game's not running. I want to clear my console, and there's a little clear button on the top left corner, right? So if I clear the console, it's done, right? And then I'm going to go back to my game or my scene and press play. It doesn't matter which one. Okay, good. So colliding, no collisions, no collisions. Let's see if I hover over an island, what happens? Oh, there's a collision. So island collision. I'm getting that now. And notice that there was 1 or 2 island collisions. That's good. That means it's detecting specifically that I'm colliding with an island. Hey, guys and girls, we're in business. Once I have a collision, I can do sounds, I can do score. No collision, none of the other stuff is going to work ever. Okay? Just letting you know. So those are the 2 things you need to make the game actually be a game, right? Right now, it's just a bunch of moving objects, right? For the game to be a game, you have to have this mechanic, which is the ability for us to collide. All right. Let's fix this. Let's go back to the script. So I've got this. It does debug.log. Let's also check to see if I'm colliding with a cloud. How should I write that? If I go with the same script, help me write that if statement. How would I write it? Come closer. I want you to stand up and come closer so we can hear you on the movie. Come.
I can be loud from here.
You can be like, she's afraid to be up here. Oh, I love it. Okay, so go ahead. If
other.gameObject.compare tag cloud.
GameObject.compare tag. By the way, compare tag works nicely on version 5 of Unity. Version 4 may not like that. You may want to do there's a different way of doing it with version 4. So if I go cloud, right? Now, if I use the curly brace here to indicate my code block, right? So I'm going to ask you this question. Should I make it I'm just going to keep writing here because this is what you're saying, right? Should I make it so that I write it 2 if statements, or should I make it an if else? Why if statements? I'm just playing a devil's advocate here. You're right, but why if statements?
It always shows.
Well, all of you are right. The reason why is because if I do if else, there might be a frame that I'm being hit by more than one object at the same time. That could happen, right? So remember, this on trigger enter 2D, this trigger is happening, right? Or the detection is happening every frame, 60 frames per second. That means I could have a situation where I have my cloud, right, and my island colliding together with my player, right here at the same time, which means I want to detect both collisions. If I did it if else, in that frame, potentially only one collision would be detected, and that would be not realistic, right? So that was the thing I need to not do, okay? All right, so this is good. So I've got my collision. Let's check to see if my cloud collides now. There's a difference thing because my clouds are prefabs. Let's check to see if prefabs work the same. We're assuming, and it's intuitive that it would, but let's check to see. And I want you to do this kind of stuff when you do your testing because don't assume anything, right? Test, and test. So there's my cloud collision. You can see it's happening here on the bottom right-hand corner. And if I go over to my island, there it is. I got an island, and I got some more cloud collisions. And you can't see them, but let's just stop and see what my console looks like. You can see that it went from cloud to island, back to cloud, and there's another island and cloud. So it detects both of them all individually. They're discrete collisions, right? That's what they are. I can detect different things. This is good. All right, we're cooking now, right now. All right, so now that I've got the collisions, right, that's good, but it really doesn't do anything. And you know what? I want to make some noises, right, when my plane collides, right? That makes sense. But in order for me to make noises, I need to make audio sources. I need to attach audio sources to the plane, right? Now, there's a couple of approaches here. One is I can attach audio sources right, to each of the objects themselves, right? My challenge with that is if I attach audio sources with them right now, and I tell you how to do this, when we're destroying objects, and if I reset it, sometimes the audio source, won't play. Like if I destroy the object, it won't play. So I want to train you so that there's a couple of approaches. One is you put it part of the game object, the game controller, right? That's one object, one way of doing it. And then you set a message that comes from the player, to the game object to say, play that sound, right? Because then the sounds all are part of the game controller. They're not part of the plane itself or whatever, right? So that's one approach. The other approach is to make it all part of the player object, right? Again, it's around how you want to organize your script and how you see things, right? Let's do everything in the plane object, all right, kind of thing. So this is what would happen. The plane object is going to be loaded with a lot of things. Let's try this out. Now remember we talked about separation of concerns. Well, let's try it both ways. So here's my plane object. I need to add a component, right? Because I'm adding a new audio source. That's what it's called. That's the component I'm adding, right? So if I click add component, oh crap, where's audio source? I don't see it here. How do I get to that audio? Oh, there it is, audio. Okay, cool. And audio listener, that's not it. Don't put audio listener. Audio listener is for the camera, right? Audio source is what I want, audio source. I could also, if I didn't know where it was, I could go add component and put audio and start typing audio as a search. And if I want to find audio source, I could pull it up here as a search. This is a quick way sometimes, especially if you want to add a specific component, especially if it's your own custom component that you made. By the way, we can do that. You probably won't do it in this course because it's an advanced feature because we modify the editor that way. But you could you could search for anything, any custom component this way. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go audio source. Now this is the trick with this, okay? Things to know when we do audio, all right? One is you need an audio clip, right? Do we have audio clips? Well, yeah, we have them right here. Here's our audio clips right here, right? And let's do it so that for now, the plane makes an engine noise. So we're going to take the engine audio clip, we're going to drag it from here and make a reference to it inside our audio clip just like this. Remember drag and drop? I told you this is a little easier. Yeah, this is how easy it is. Okay, cool. We've created an audio source. By the way, we might ask, what about the order, Tom? What's important? Should we put the audio source before my scripts? Yeah, probably. So I'm probably going to move this up, right? And then we can collapse it later. Let's move it up one more time. Just from an organizational perspective, you don't have to. You can leave it the way it is. I'm not going to rank you on it. I'm not going to sit there and go, so and so. You didn't put your components in the right order. I don't care, right? It's just for me, when I organize my stuff, when I make the game, I like it so that all my scripts are at the bottom. So I can always take a look and see. I can modify their variables, anything that's exposed on the inspector. That's what I want to look at, and that's why I do it that way. Not for any other reason. Okay, cool. I've got my engine sound. Let's see if it plays, right? So I'm going to press play, and then it's pretty darn loud, right? Who did that? Is that me? Let's try that again. That's not me. There it is. So oh, wait, what happened? It cut out. It played it one time, and then it's gone. How do I make it continuous play? So let's go back to my audio source, right? And notice how it says output, mute, bypass effects. Oh, loop. Let's click that on, right? That's how it is. So now it'll loop forever, right? That's what this does, loop forever. By the way, each of these properties you can programmatically affect. So if I want to say loop is equal to true, because obviously it's a checkbox. Checkbox for you should mean in your mind, true or false. Is it on or off, right? So checkbox for loop would be on, which is equal to true. And therefore, if the checkbox is showing on, then it's going to play the loop indefinitely. All right, so let's try this out. And let's make it go. So it's going to make the plane go. Right? By the way, somebody's going, whoa, 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 whoa. That's what they're doing to make this thing go. Not me, all right? But somebody else. Right? And it's going to go off from. So that's good. So the engine sound should be attached to the plane. That makes sense. And we shouldn't move it. When the plane is instantiated in the scene, the engine sound should play, right? That makes sense. Notice that again, I don't have anything to do code-wise. I just attach a sound to my plane and it's playing right away. Note that when you attach any audio source to an object, it automatically plays on awake. That means before the start method is triggered, it's going to play the sound. That's not always the effect we want, especially for the following effects. I want to collide with my island, and I want to collide with my cloud, right? So if I collide with my island, it's going to go yay. And when I collide with my cloud, it's going to go some weird sound, right? So I don't want those noises to play right away, but I want to reference the audio sources, right? Listen to my words, audio sources. If I have more than one audio source and I want to reference the second or third audio source, what kind of structure am I talking about? Audio source, one audio source. Audio sources. I have multiple audio sources. Could be 5, it could be 100. Huh? Array. I want to have an array of audio sources, right? So what I want to do in my code is detect how many components I have. This is the cheap and dirty way to do it, right? And I want to look at the second, in order, by the way. It's in order. It's important that you put it in order, right? And I want to play those sounds. Okay, cool. So let's do this. Let's drag in a couple audio sources. There's 2 ways of doing audio sources. One way is to add component. The other one is just to drag in into the object itself. So let's collapse this one and add in the thunder sound, right? And I'm going to also add in, let's try that again. Here's my thunder sound, right? Oh, wait, what happened? How come it replaced my plane sound with my thunder sound? That's not what I want. I want my engine sound to play there. I got to click on add component. Add component. Audio source. There's another audio source. Let's bring that second audio source up. This is why some people say, and there's 2 camps on this one. You know, Tom, I probably would want to make my audio sources part of some other component, other thing, and then trigger them somehow. It's more difficult to do that way. I don't want to play my thunder sound. Here's my thunder sound, right? I'm dragging and dropping the second audio source. I'm putting the thunder audio clip attached to it. That's the reference to the audio. I don't want to play this on awake. That means every time I play, when I instantiate my game, I hear the boom of the thunder, right? That doesn't make any sense. So uncheck this one. And I don't want it to loop continuously. It's only going to play once. Okay, so that's on. Let's do the next one. So I'm going to minimize that one and add another component. We're going to make that an audio source as well. And here's my third audio source, right? And let's just move it up first before we attach it. So move component up. I deleted it. Let's try that again. That was an accident. Audio source. Let's move it up. Instead of deleting it, put removed. Move up. And you have to be careful of that too. And move that up as well. Woo. Okay, cool. So we got my audio source up there. And now let's add in, we don't want to do play on awake, so we turn that off. And I, pull in my yay sound into there. Okay, there, yay. Okay. So the way I've written these audio sources in an array, how would I index these audio sources? 0 for the first one, 1 for the second one, 2 for the third one, right? I could also loop through the array, right, and play them all through a loop if I wanted to. There's other ways we can do this too. I could extend my audio source and give it a name, right? So I could name the audio source. Notice that my audio source by default doesn't have a name, but it does have an audio clip that is attached to it. So I could test for what the audio clip is and play that one, right? I could do that. But that doesn't make any sense, right? And I'll show you why in a second. Okay, so we'll go back to our collision. This is the best place to put my audio sources because you know what? We're not doing any movement here. All we're doing is collisions, and we're also doing something with some kind of audio, audio playing, right? So when I collide with my island, I want to play my audio source, right? But I need a reference to my audio source up here, which means I need to create some kind of private instance variables because I don't care about exposing this on the inspector, right? We don't need to do that. You could, by the way, you could certainly do that, but we're not going to. And we're going to make an array of audio sources, right? So it's going to be private, right? And it's going to be of type audio source. Here it is. Except it's not going to end there. It's going to be an array of audio sources, right? Which we're going to call this audio sources. Different audio sources or sounds. You can also make it called sounds. So that makes it easier for you, right? Okay, cool. We're declaring an array of audio sources here. Is this array instantiated? Have I created an object of this array? First is we declare this of audio sources, right? But the other thing is that I want to somehow link my array to my component stack, right? That's what I want to do. So the right way to do it is on start, right? We want to make a reference to this audio sources object. By the way, we should probably put an underscore to keep with our conventions, right? We want to make a reference to this audio sources. We're going to assign, the components right? All the components that are audio source components, we're going to assign them to this array of audio sources. And that's how we instantiate it. Because once we've done that, we're good, we're golden. Let's try this out. Let's see if it works. So we'll say this dot underscore audio sources, right, is equal to game object, that's the plane, dot get components, more than one component, not component. Before we use component, single component. Now we're using components, multiple components, of type audio source, right? Audio source. And if I go through here, you can see that there's an audio source component type, and this is the way we do it. Does that make sense to you? So what I'm doing is I'm getting all the components of type audio source, which there's more than one, and I'm putting them into my audio sources object, right? Let's test for this. So if I do this, and if I go debug.log, let's just do this for the first time without doing anything else. Debug.log, so you understand what's happening here. And then I put in there this dot underscore audio sources. Let's see what I get, right? So I want to say my audio sources, right? Okay, cool. And let's run this thing and see if it works. If I get an error, the time will be now, right? So boom, I make it work, and I'm going to stop playing, right? There we go. So I want to see what I get from my console. It says Unity audio source array with a Unity debug, which is an object. I'm getting an object, which is good. That's a good sign. If I got some really weird, thing going on, right? I'm getting an audio source array. It's happening, right? It's good. If I had a problem with this, an example problem would be, what are you talking about? The array has never been instantiated yet, Tom, right? This automatically instantiates my array. It's almost like initializing my array with a group of audio sources. It's the way it's an initializer, if you will. All right, we can use it as an initializer as opposed to using the new keyword. I could have done that too. I could have said audio source, this dot underscore audio sources is equal to a new array of type audio source, right? I could have done that too, but that's unnecessary. All right, I'm just letting you know that it can be done this way. All right, so if you see it written this way up online, that's what's happening. Once you do this line, right, you initialize, let's initialize our array, initialize the audio source array, audio sources array, right here. That's what we're doing, right, with that from our game component. So that's good. So we've got that. But we want to split those sources up, and we want a friendly name for them, because you know what? Audio sources 0, audio sources 1, and audio sources 2 means nothing, right? So let's make some other private names here for those, right? Now we may change this to public at some point, but let's just do it. So private, and we're going to make it of type audio source again, right? A regular audio source, not audio source array. And the first one we're going to call is, we're going to make it a underscore, and it's going to be called the island sound, right? So island sound. Right? There it is. Okay, that's our private audio source. Let's do the next one. Private audio source, right? A cloud sound. Cloud sound, right? Now you can call it cloud collision sound. You can be more specific if you want. And yours would be different, obviously, because you're going to make your own game, right? So now I've got these two things. I've made an array, a reference to my audio sources array, and now I want to take the index of that array, right? The specific index that I want in order, and assign it to one of these two audio sources. Let's do that. So we're going to do, and arrays, by the way, are the most confusing pieces to anybody's programming career. If you don't know arrays, you're in trouble, right? And if we'll talk about arrays at length if we don't understand, please put your hand up. All right, so this dot underscore island sound, right, then, is equal to this dot, what do I put? I want to reference the first element. No, that's 0. 0 is the engine, right? So what do I play for? How do I access like the island sound? That's like 2, right? 0, 1, 2. That's the last one I added in, right? So it's audio sources 2, right? Make sense? Audio sources 2. So this is like, and how did I get that? You're going to wonder, right? Well, because I mean, this is a little bit of, I'll be honest with you, a little bit of hard coding, if you will, right? Because what if I change the order around here? This would be bad, right? But my engine sound is 1, 0. My thunder sound is 1. And my yay sound is 2, right? So that's why I got that. That's where I got that from. So there's my 2, right? And just to be we should have probably done my cloud sound first. So this dot underscore cloud sound then is equal to this dot underscore audio sources, right? The array of audio sources, 1, right? So the first audio source, if you will, or the 1th. That's the way you're supposed to say it. 0th, the 1th, the 2nd, and so on. First, because when you say first, in your mind you think about the first one, which is not right. Okay, cool. So so that's cool. So we've got those audio sources. How do I play them? So theoretically, if I collide with my island, let's replace this with this dot underscore island sound, right? Dot play, right? That's pretty easy. And do the same thing for the cloud, right? This dot underscore cloud sound dot play. Okay, you might say this is good. Let's see how this works, right? Does that make sense? Play, cloud sound play. So we're using the play method of the audio source. Play method of the audio source, right? By the way, the audio source has a lot of methods. If I go this dot underscore island sound, right? And if I go dot, you can see that I can pull down a loop, which we talked about. Remember, I can loop it, I can mute it, I can stop it so you don't hear it anymore. I can pause it, I can play it, right? Maybe I can even stop it. There it is. So I can do the whole gamut. I can unpause it. I can do all that stuff. Right now we're just playing. All right. Let's test this and see if it works. So just go back to my Unity, right? I'm going to go back to my game or my scene and press play, and let's see if it actually plays what I'm supposed to play. So, wait, what's going on?
Yay.
How come it's...
Yay.
That's cool. 1.
Yay.
Notice how I'm only getting 1 collision, but look what's happening here. What if I go back and forth like this? If I go out and back in,
Yay.
I can hit the cloud more than 1 time. So I want that to happen, is the question. There's a problem, and you may not see it. Same thing with the island. If I go
Yay.
like this,
Yay.
if I kind of try and get in there
Yay.
a couple times, I can't.
Yay.
Not so fast, but right.
Yay.
I could lose multiple
Yay.
lives. Is what I'm saying, right? So when the collision is actually happening, I don't want another collision to happen. So if I get hit by a cloud, I've been hit, right? Give me a chance to not be hit anymore, right? Until the sound stops, let's say. Right? That's one way of doing it. If you want to make it more playable. If you want to leave it like this, is fine too. All right? The only thing is that I can get multiple collisions happening if I come in and out of the island, in and out of the cloud. If I go into the cloud, I get hit. And if I go out of the cloud and go back into the cloud again, I'll get hit again. Right? Because it's going to be a discrete collision. So you got to think about that. You'll hear like ba-bang, bang, ba-bang, bang, as opposed to 1 collision. Right? The other thing to do is this. If I get hit with my cloud, maybe what I want to do is reset the player somewhere. So I get hit, and then give it a second, and then come back in, right? That means I only got hit 1 time. I lost my life, and it gives the player a chance to recover and play again, right? So that's a game mechanic thing. That is not how I'm doing my script thing. That's an additional script that I got to write to make that nicer. We'll leave those refinements for later. Let's make our game work, all right? So right now, at this juncture, we're going to take a short break. I've got all my collisions working, and they make the sound, but we don't have any scoring working on, right? Well, that's happening right now. Okay, so there's no score. We got no UI for the score, first of all, and we've got no way of sending a signal, right? And you're tired, you want to take a break. Let's do that. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll see if we can get more of this game done.